people. Yeah, warm welcome. Yesterday we have start with the history of English literature, and in the segment history of English literature, we had started that how the English language itself started flourishing and how it has the base, how it has just stepped into the realm of the literature and as we just go further, we have seen that is the political supremacy or the stability of the government at that time was worked as a stepping stone for the development of the literature and aesthetic views of the society of that time. Okay, we have seen that is from 455 to 1055. We have these uh, mm, initial period which we can call as an Anglo-Saxons. Okay, today we're going to deal with the literature of uh, mm, specifically Anglo-Norman period, which has deliberate merits of English literature, and it's come off with a bit more what we say modification in the language as well as in the realm of the literature. Okay, so in that case, yesterday we went through some aspects like Cadmion, then Beaumont and Wolf. These are some writers who had played an important role to just start, or we can say just give a kick start to the realm of the literature in English scene. But it started cultivating in this Middle English period specifically, and the starting of this Middle English period we can find it's from the Anglo-Norman period, which was considered from 1066 to the 1350. After 1350, it was considered as a age of Chaucer. Okay, that is the birth of the Geoffrey Chaucer. That is 1340 to 1400. This was the time frame of Geoffrey Chaucer. But before him, we can see that is a little development of the or flourishment in literature has took place. Okay, yeah, and again I would like to tell you that is please feel free to ask anything. You have a chat box. Okay, you can type down your questions. Okay, जर काही प्रश्न असतील तर तुमचे प्रश्न तिथं लिहा. ओके, चॅट बॉक्समध्ये will discuss. Okay, any question, not only regarding syllabus, any questions. I know that is as we have split the syllabus, Pranav sir will is taking the another part, that is literary part and all stuff. But as I told you, I'm just dealing with these first four first four units and the culture study, that is these 5 units. So in the literary perspective, I am going to cover the whole literature or literary aspects like British literature as well as this American literature and world literature specifically. These all things I'm going to teach, and to the best of my knowledge, you people had started with these uh, English in India and development of English. Okay, linguistics kind of parts with the pronunciation. So whatever questions you have or whatever things you want to discuss, you have to discuss with me regarding literature. So chat box is yours. Feel free to ask anything. Okay. So yesterday we had discussed this Cinewolf, Beowulf, then Cadmion. These are the writers. Then Historia Regum Britannia, which probably will discuss today also. Ecclesiastical history of English literature or English people specifically. It was written by Saint Bede. That was one of the crucial thing which we must have an idea. Then we have seen that how English is developed as a language. Okay, before there was all dialects. Okay, no this thing like language over there. These all were the dialects. Okay, but eventually we can find there is a kind of development took place, which was still even today we can find, that is Oxford Dictionary every year just publish the words which have included in the dictionary. So development of the language is in a continuous process which still even today going on. Okay, in that case we can take the example of the chatting language, the language we use to chat on WhatsApp or social media specifically. Okay, it was considered as the uh, new version of language nowadays. So the same thing we have seen, that is languages started developing from Anglo-Norman, Anglo-Saxon period, and in Anglo-Norman it was in continuation. So the 4.5 centuries between the Norman conquest in 1066, which affect the radical changes in the language, life, and culture of England, that about 1500, when the standard literary language that is derived from the dialects of the London area had become recognizably modern English. The same thing I have told you. Okay, that is similar to the language we speak and write today. So this spam was from 1100 to 1350, is sometimes discriminated as the Anglo-Norman period. So this one, because the non-Latin literature of this time was written mainly in Anglo-Norman way, let's say, specifically the French dialect. These Anglo-Normans, they were no one but the extended version of these French people. They were also kind of invaders over there. They just come and settle there. We had seen them. That is, these people, they were preferred uh, high culture, or we can find that these people, they were the Latin speakers, and specifically the influence of the French dialect over their writing or over their way of living, way of worship, way of discussing, these all things we have seen. So this one, that is the non-Latin literature of that time was written mainly in Anglo-Norman, the French dialect spoken by the invaders who had established themselves as the ruling class of England, and who shared a literary culture and French-speaking areas of mainland Europe. So uh, actually this is the thing when we can find, that is French influence is one of the important stuff we can find in this early stage of development of the language and the literature. And then uh, specifically the culture which we had talked, French influence is one of the stuff in this thing. Then the role of the Christianity, that is the another thing. And then the most important, development or the involvement of the native people. So these people, they don't have their own language, they have dialects. Okay, different dialects, and eventually it's became an English language. The people who speaking the language around London area. Okay, Norman conquest, don't want to talk more about it, we already had discussed it yesterday, but a quick recap time, that is the French king Charles the Simple treaty at St. Clair sur Epte with Viking chief Rollo, and this was the stuff happened when Normans land of the Normandy or Northmen was considered as the Normans. Okay, and then there is Norman conquest happen, and from these Germanic tribes, mean let's say uh, rule, or the crux of the society, specifically when we just go and try to find out these things, the power has been shifted from these uh, invaders to these Norman people. One of the famous name in this regard, that is the Edward the Confessor, Harold Godwinson. Okay, and in that case we have this Magnus and Harald Hardrada. They were the Norwegian invaders, but there is a big quarrel happened in 1055, and that was considered as the Norman conquest of England, and this thing has changed the whole scenario. Okay, we have seen it yesterday only, so I don't want to go that much deep into it. The next stuff associated with this one is the literary development of the period. Literary development of the period. Then extensive period saw many developments in the history of England. The establishment of Norman and Angevin dynasties, the internal struggles between king, nobles, clergy, and people, and the numerous wars both at home and abroad. So we can find that is this was the period of uncertainty, and still there was not stability, and these people were struggling for their own bread. Okay, but yeah, apart from this, they must have go to govern their own things, their own people, and that's why we can find that the changes took place. So from the literary point of view, however, we can see that is more important than definite events were the general movements of the time. Nothing but these general movements, like the rise of the religious orders, as I told you, Christianity, their early enthusiasm and their subsequent decline, then the this blossoming of chivalry and the spirit of romance, that bringing that has bringing new sympathy for women and the poor, the crusades and the widening of European outlook, which was gradually to expand into the rebirth of the intellect known as the Renaissance. Okay, so these are all things. When we just try to find out, we can find that most of the political things has took place in this period, and they, by the time, they just changed the scenario of the literature. Okay, and they impacted the literature as the way where we can see that literature itself became very powerful after uh, what we can say, Geoffrey Chaucer's introduction to the English society. Okay, and then even today we can see that is war is what happens when language fails. Okay, famous quote by Margaret Atwood. But this was the thing. Even today we can find that is language is nothing but the part of the literature. Okay, the development of language and development of the literature just goes hand in hand. Till in this 12th century, we can find that these people were struggling for these things, and this uh, widening outlook of European society we can find in the early stage of the development of English period, specifically the literature of this Anglo-Norman period. Okay, and then we know that is it's just cultivate into the Renaissance, and Renaissance had make all the difference. Yeah, so all these were symptoms of growing intelligence, and that was strongly reflected in the literature of the period. The same thing which I have told you. Literature is nothing but the mirror of the society, and we can find there is a reflection of the society, or the reflection of social values we can see through the literature. Okay, uh, this was the point which I think we had discussed yesterday, but a bit uh, addition to it. State of the English language at that time, as I told you, that is, it was not so called language at that time, it was a dialect. So the period sees the development of Middle English with the gradual this weakening of the inflectual system of the older period. Okay, hope now you can see better. State of the English language, the period sees the development of Middle English with the gradual weakening of the inflectional system of older period. we know that is that language was not that much developed, but in old English period we have this West Saxon dialect. I have told you four dialects yesterday. One of them is this West Saxon. Specifically Anglo-Saxon people try to converse with this language. Okay. Then this uh, Scandinavian and French loans was there. These Scandinavian and French loan words were included in this language. They were found the later in increasing numbers in this regard. So the dialects which were noted in the Old English period continue to develop, and it is usual to distinguish these five main dialect areas. So on the basis of these dialect areas we can find that there is the development of language was took place, and these five main dialect areas were: first one is northern. Okay, yeah, we talked about it, northern area, and that was the Northumbrian dialect. Okay, which was which can be subdivided into lowland Scots and northern English, corresponding to the old Northumbrian dialect. Then we have East Midlands and West Midlands, corresponding to Mercian. Okay, these are the kingdoms. Then southeastern, corresponding to Kentish language dialect, and southwestern, corresponding to West Saxon. Okay, only this West Saxon was there. Um, and then what happened? Gradually, a standard is developed, which was to become the received standard English uh, of today from this East Midland dialect. This was the dialect was spoken surrounding of London city. East Midland dialect. Okay, so after this, let's talk about the poetry of this period. So we move towards the literature, or let's say the literary stuff. Yeah. Any questions regarding this? Yeah. So poetry, the Norman conquest worked no immediate transformation. Okay. No immediate transformation. Yeah. The Norman conquest, we can find that it worked to immediate transformation on either the language of the literature or of the English. Specifically, when you talk about the poetry of this period, it was consist of some literature of the Anglo-Norman period, specifically romances written in Anglo-Norman period. Okay, can you see the board properly? Can you read it? Yeah, बोर्डवरचं वाचता येतंय? If yes, can you see the board properly? Can you read it? तुम्हाला समजते तुमच्या स्क्रीनवर? Yes or no? Just let me know. Otherwise, I have to use something different stuff. Yeah, when you talk about the development of the poetry, older poetry continued to be copied during the last half of this 11th century. Okay, again, the Normans, uh, even though they started their own literature or their own literary values at that time, we can find that they also have copied something from their ancestors. And the same, the first thing regarding to this, that is the older poetry was copied, to be copied during the 11th century. And there were two known poems. We have two known poems of the period. Okay, in that was written in early 12th century. First one is Durham, which praises the city's cathedral and its relic and these instructions of Christians. I already have told you one thing, that this early period, it was heavily influenced by the Christianity or the Christian aesthetic values. So that's why we can see that is most of literature was religious in nature, and we can find the dominance of Christian narratives, or specifically the Christian religious stuff on the writing of this early period of the literature. Okay, English literature specifically. These two are the famous poems of the period, which had some, okay, not total, some literary values, because they are nothing but the copied from the older poetries, and some of them, they were the translations. Yeah, a didactic piece shows the correct alliterative verse could be composed well after 1066. So second half of the 11th century. But even before the conquest, rhyme had begun to supplant rather than supplement alliteration in the some poems. So specifically, when we see this poetry, first of all, we must have to see that is there is a major role of alliteration. Okay, so this alliterative verse could be composed, and then this supplement of alliteration in some poems which continue to use older four stress line, although their rhythms varied from the each other. Okay, uh, again we can find the influence of the classical old English verse uh, on the writing of these poems, which were not so called standard one, but yeah, still again we can call it as a copied from the um, mm, these classical writings of the time. Then a post conquest example is the grave. Again, you know, दिस ऑल लिटरेचर, हे जे लिटरेचर आहे ना सुरुवातीचं, बिफोर चॉसर, अजून मी तुम्हाला हे इतक्या डीपमध्ये का सांगतो, कारण की तुम्हाला मी काल पण बोललो होतो या विषयावर. इट विल हेल्प यू when we just move after Chaucer period, okay, in Renaissance also, because when we study Shakespeare, okay, most of the Shakespeare's historical plays, they were based on this early literature written in the uh, in the in English language specifically. So when we just go and see these all stuff, we find that yeah, these are the important stuff, and it is, let's say, a stepping stone for the English writing or English poetry, and that's why it has some merits, and that's why we were discussing it very deep. And the same thing, there is a thin line over here. Okay, so this is the, let's say, the literature. When we talk about this thin line, Anglo-Saxons, then come Norman conquest, and then literature a after Norman conquest. So Norman conquest is line of parallel, we can say, that is Norman conquest was one of the historical event which has changed the whole scenario. So Norman conquest च्या अगोदर जे literature होतं, it was totally different. The literature come after it, it has very strong literary values, literary merits. So that's why we have to see these things, we have to use it in our study also. Okay. um, After, we can see that is there was too much political developments happened in this period. We'll talk about it, but one of them is Magna Carta. You might have heard about this. If you have, some of you have corely studied for the net set, you might have heard about this Magna Carta, one of the important event in the history of English literature. Not only history of English literature, but history of the cultivation of the England itself and the world history also. Okay, I'm talking about the Magna Carta, one of the event which has took place. Just Google it, you can find it. Okay, one of it is considered as the starting period of democracy. Starting period of democracy in England, I must say. कारण की आपल्याकडे तर त्याच्या अगोदरच विषय होता तो काही विषयच नाहीये. पण इंग्लंडमध्ये जेव्हा डेमोक्रेसीचा विषय निघतो किंवा डेव्हलपमेंट ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी या विषयावर आपण जेव्हा जिथं कुठं अभ्यास करू, सो यू मस्ट हॅव एन आयडिया, और हा एक विषय येतो, दॅट इज मॅग्ना कार्टा. ओके, विल टॉक अबाउट इट, बट when time comes. So this is the literature we can find at that time. So a post conquest example is The Grave, which contains several rhyming lines, and a poem from the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles on the death of William the Conqueror. आता William the Conqueror, again one of the important name in the Norman conquest. Lamenting his cruelty and greed has more rhyme than alliteration. Okay, तर परत aspects of the poem we can find out there. आणि जे सुरुवातीचे जे poems होतात ना, like the starting of the literature, it was basically in the old form, and we can find that they always try to narrate the message. Not only poetry, all, even drama also. When you talk about the drama, starting period like mystery plays, miracle plays. Okay, when we talk about drama, we'll discuss these all things. But these different cycles, Wakefield cycle, York cycles. Okay, uh, they all people, we can find that they just try to give a kind of message, specifically the religious message, and then eventually it's changed to the today's uh, till today's masterpiece, we can say. In that case, when you talk about uh, the development, the both drama and the poetry, it was a continuous process. But yeah, several people had played very important role in that regards also. Yeah, we'll discuss it throughout the course. Hope you just getting my point. If if any if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Okay, bola. Literature is the subject of discussion, not the subject of listening only. Yeah. Uh, I must enter this realm of the poetry on this point, that is the influence of French poetry. So the literature of the starting period, we can find that literature of this Anglo-Norman period was heavily influenced by the French poetry. During this Anglo-Norman period, Old English poetry totally disappeared, and English began to discard in favor of French and Latin language. As it moves on, we can find writings in this English vernacular began to be disregarded, and French became established as a natural speech of the cultivated and the highborn. ओके म्हणजे उच्चभ्रू लोकांची भाषा फ्रेंच and Latin, and those who belongs to the minorities or lower strata of the society, they were speaking this English language. So English was a inferior language in England itself when in 11th century. Yeah, hope you are getting my point. Then in contrast with this strength and sombrance of this Anglo-Saxon poetry, the Normans brought to England bright and romantic tales of love and adventure. And then English literature inevitably felt the influence of this Norman French. So that was, we can find the influence of the French poetry in the starting period of English literature, and that's why English literature inevitably felt this influence of the Norman French over their language or in their literature also. In poetry, for example, the Anglo-Saxon versification gave way to these regular meter and rhymes, and in subject matter too, it was change was great. So not only what we can say, the structure of poetry has changed, but also we can find that is the subject matter, and one thing is subject matter, and the second thing, the process of delivering a poetry or writing a poetry also changed. Before, these people, they were just copying from their old verses, or they just try to go for the religious stuff. But after the introduction of the French poetry or these Normans, we can see that is to we can find a total change in the development of the poetry in this period. The French had developed this chivalric system, okay, to point of this brilliance and this elaborateness unknown in England specifically. The elaborative section was uh, in the dark at that period, but after the introduction of these Normans, it had gained, what we can say, that name and fame, as well as that a glory, and then we can see that is too much elaborative poems were written in the in England specifically. Romances became a popular literary forms, there's indicating the age to be the chivalric rather than the heroic one. There were several literature written. There is Breton lays were developed by writers like Marie de France. I'll tell you these names. These are very important. We have over here also. Then we have these Cretin de Troyes into the form known as these romances. Romances of the most popular narrative genre was late medieval readers, and yes, we can find that is mm, these romances has played an important role in the development of this early literature of the English. Mm, Before moving towards these poems or a specific literature, I would like to tell you one thing which is uh, also had given very what we can call it as very instructional sense to the poetry of the age, which has changed the scenario of the poetry, and that is nothing but this Brut. Okay, when you talk about these brutes, that is Anglo-Norman brute, one of them. By the end of this 12th century, English poetry had been so heavily influenced by these French models that such a work at the long epic Brut. Okay, these brutes are. specifically the lengthy poems which describe most of the events in eventfulness. Okay, this brute related to the this legendary history of Britain tells the story of Brutus, descendant of Aeneas. What is this brute? Okay, one of the important aspect, brute related to the legendary history of the Britain tells the story of Brutus. It is nothing but the story of the Brutus, who was the descendant of Aeneas. Yeah. So the brute exists in two manuscripts again. So त्याला प्रूफ पाहिजे तर या ब्रुटसला पण प्रूफ आहे ब्रूट्सला पण प्रूफ आहेत. We have two manuscripts of these brutes. One written shortly after this 1200 and the other some 50 years later, means specifically in 13th century. Brutes. That the later version has been extensively modernized and somewhat abridged, suggests the speed with language which English language and literary states were changing in the period, and then these brutes were associated with several people. First one we have this Vase brute. Okay, brute of Vases. Vases Roman de brute. Yeah, just have a look on it. These brutes are nothing but the poetic versions. Okay, the poetry of the period, we can say. So Vases Roman de brute, written in 1155, based in turn upon Geoffrey of Monmouth's History Regum Britannia. I told you these things. Okay, this is one of the important name you must have to keep in your mind. That is the Geoffrey of Monmouth Historia Regum Britannia. That is history of the kings of Britain. Okay, West uses Geoffrey's stories such as those of King Lear and King Arthur with lively inventiveness and originality, and then drawing on oral sources and his own knowledge of the parts of Britain, and then he has written this story. Okay, that is Vessis Roman de Brute. So Ves is the name, and his poetry written by him, it's called as the Roman de Brute. Roman de Brute, written in 1155. Second, we have this Layman's Brute, which was written in 1200. It was a poetical paraphrase of the Brute of West. It's nothing but the poetical paraphrase of the Brute of West, and it begins with fall of Troy and proceed with the story of Brutus. Fall of Troy. Each and every student of English literature, he or she must have an idea about the fall of Troy or Helen of Troy. You might have heard about these names, but you don't know the whole story. But yes, we have to study it. It was considered as one of the important history which has given a subject to the literature. Okay, just focus on the word. So, fall of Troy and this process with the story of Brutus. We have this extended basis brute from
Body sweet we we stand. गाडी कोणाची आहे?
So this one. So Lemons Brut. Then we have this extended Wessex Brut from 1500 15,300 lines to 32,241 lines. So it's nothing but the Arthurian story takes on the Germanic and heroic flavor, largely missing in Wes. Again, now when you talk about the Wes, he has just go with the history. He has put his own efforts into it. But some others, they have used his theory, that is West's theories, but they just add some flavors like Germanic flavors or barbaric flavors to their literature, and they just present it in a different way. The same thing we can find in these extended Wes's Brut from these lines which I have mentioned over here. So the Brut exists in two manuscripts, one written shortly after this 1200 and another 50 years later. And we can find this, the Proverbs of the Alfred was written somewhere earlier in the late 12th century. These proverbs deliver conventional wisdom in a mixture of rhymed couplets and alliterative lines. And it is hardly likely that any of the material they contain actually to originated with the king whose wisdom they celebrate. So it has its own story, it has its uh, own way to um, deliver their message, and specifically we can see the storyline of these work Brutes was heavily uh, based on the life of the King Arthur and King Lear of the period. Okay, we can say that is what they have done. They done nothing but they celebrated uh, this king and this king's wisdom through the literature. Yeah. Now, you we might have some important names in this PDF. When we just try to find out the early development of the poetry, these 2 to 3 names are very important. Okay. Two influential French poets, both of whom are likely to have worked in England. Not sure, there is no surety about this one whether they had worked in England or not, but yeah, both of them are likely to have worked in England. Mary de France, okay, Mary de France, this was the time frame, and the Chrétien de Troyes, this is the time frame. They made particularly effective literary capital out of such phenomena. Okay, so whatever little things they have, they uh, they just produce some effective literary capital uh, from that scratches. Okay, Mary's 12 brief lays then adapted, she claims, from Breton stories, draw on a wide range of settings and geographical references. So again, in this people's poetry, we can find some geographical references. Okay, when we talk about specifically Mary de France, she's the she was a lady. Uh, she was considered as the part of generation of writers. Notable among them, that is this Christian and Detroit and all. She is best known for her lays. So this poem. Maris tell brief lays. This is the name of the poem written by Mary de France, and which are the short narrative or lyrical poems specifically. It's nothing but the short lyricals and narratives and lyrical poems, usually in octosyllabic couplets intended to be sung. Hmm. This poetic and musical form was popular among the poets of northern France. Even so, we can find that this was the one stuff which the French people had given to the England, and this English were they had copied it from this in the name of this writing of Mary de France. Okay, but whatever she has written, it was, we can find, that is drawn on a wide range of settings and geographical references. So, um, Norway, Brabant, Ireland, Normandy, Britain, that was the stuff which was described in her poetry. Only one, that is the Lanwell. Lanwell, again, one of the name of the poem which refers to the Arthur by name, but most of the other stories deal with the amatory encounters of the knights and ladies in a world informed by both chivalrous action and supernatural influences. So, we have to keep in mind that is Mary de France was the lady who has written the 12 set of the poems. Brief Lays, the name of this poem, that is Brief Lays. Okay, where she has given the references uh, from the day-to-day life of the people who live in these different areas. That is geographical uh, references we have from Norway, Brabant, Ireland, Normandy, and Britain. And there is only one poem. The name of the poem is Lanwell. It referred to the King Arthur by name, but again, it is the poem which talks about the chivalric action and supernatural influences of the knights and ladies in the world of the time. So this is about the Mary de France. The second important name in this regard we have is cretin. Okay, uh, cretin de Troyes. This is her time frame, that is 1170 to 90. When we just uh, go and try to find out the writings, we can find that is uh, Cretin de Troyes was the person which considered as the French poet who is known for the 5 Arthurian romances he wrote in 12th century. Okay, mm, but before moving towards the Cretin de Troy, I would like to tell that is Mary's 12 brief lays. Okay, they were available on internet also, or in any history of English literature's books. Just go and have a look into it. Okay, Lanwell, as I told you, one of them. Then Equitan was one of it. We have this left friend, that is the ash tree, was one of them. The nightingale, then Milam was another name associated with these lays of Mary de France. So Cretin, what he has done, he has wrote a version of the Treason legend. His 5 surviving romances reveal a more deliberate interest in the stories centered on the Camelot. One of the important name in this regard is the Camelot. His Wayne and his Chevalier Delay, Charette or Lancelot, and his incomplete Percival or Le Conte du Grel, all treat legends which were later considered central to the Arthurian canon. So the writing of these people, we can find it was surrounded by the King Arthur's Arthurian canon only. Okay. Two works of the both poets seems to have circulated both widely and over a long period in England. Yuan being translated and somewhat simplified as Yuan and Gavon. We know Saint Gavon's tales. Okay, and Mary Lanwell providing the base for several late 14th century versions of the same story. That is Sir Landewell, Sir Lambswell, Sir Lamwell, and Thomas the Castries, Sir Lansfall. They all have a base of Mary de Brut. Equally significantly, the forms preferred in French by Meride and Christian were to exercise a considerable influence over the later English poet, either as translators or as confident vernacular practitioners. As I told you, these two are very important poets. They influenced the whole generation of English writers in the early stage, no matter whether they were the translators or the vernacular practitioners of the language or the poetry. Uh, it was the writing of these people, it was heavily influenced by this Mary de France and Chrétien de Troyes. Okay. Mary's this short rhyme Breton laid provided models for the Chaucer's Franklin's Tale and the for Gower's Tale of uh, Rossifil. Again, Chaucer, he also had get the ideas from these writers, those we can call as the uh, starters of the English literature, or those who had given a birth to the English literature of the period. Mary de France and Chrétien de Troyes. Now I would like to mm, introduce you some important poems of the age. That is, by far the most brilliant poem of this period is nothing but the Owl and the Nightingale. It was written after 1189, but an example of the popular debate genre. Okay, there is a debate in the poetry, and it was considered as the debate genre. The two birds argue topics ranging from their hygienic habits, looks, and songs to marriage, then prognostication and the proper modes of worship. Nightingale stands for the joyous aspects of life, and the owl for the somber. So again, we can find there is a symbolic poetry. The nightingale stands for the joyous aspect of life, and the owl for the somber. There is no clear winner, but the debate ends as the birds go off to state their case to one Nicholas of Guildford, a wise man. So, debatable poetry, but it has some important literary merit also. Okay, the poem is learned in the this clerical tradition, but we are learning lightly as the disputant speaks in colloquial and sometimes early language. Uh, like the poem Moral, the owl and the nightingale is metrically regular. Again, meters, octosyllabic couplets, but it used the French meter with the assurance unusual in so early a poem. So, it is a kind of technical details or technicality of the literature. Owl and the Nightingale. Approximately 2000 lines of verse in rhyme. Okay. The another name which is associated with this poetry or this poem, I don't know whether, yeah, we have here, that is nothing but this didactic poetry. This Cursor Mundi was one of the name associated with this one, but yeah, just have a look in to it. Then we'll discuss these biblical paraphrases and the didactic poetry. Oh, sorry, Akshay. Please let me know. Thank you. Right now, can you hear me? Am I audible? Hello, Akshay. Am I audible now? Yeah. Thank you. There's a technical glitch. Yeah. So we're talking about the verse romance, specifically King Horn, where a genre that would remain popular throughout the Middle Ages, appeared in 13th century, and King Horn and Floris, this Blanchefleur, both are the preserved in the manuscript about 1250. So manuscript was considered as one of the important part in the development of any literature. Okay, so a King Horn, oddly written in short 2 and 3 stressed lines. Now this is a kind of technical explanation of King Horn. Is a vigorous tale of a kingdom lost and regained, with a subplot concerning Horn's love for Princess Remenhild. Now it's it's like a Hindi Bollywood movie. That is, King Horn was the person who just the person who just lost his kingdom and then he just regained, and it has a subplot where he was fall in love with a lady called Princess Remenhild, and how then he just survived, and how um, the story goes on, and he gained both things, his kingdom, regain his kingdom, and he got his lady love also. Floris and this Blanchefleur is more exotic, being the tale of a pair of royal lovers who become separated and after various adventures in eastern lands reunited. Again, this is the story. See, just bring the picture in front of you. King Horn, even though it was written by these two, Floris and Blanchefleur, sorry, Blanchefleur. These two, he had described a story in a way that a writer can assume each and everything. So what he has done, they both have showed you a royal luxury over there, then the love story between this royal couple, then their adventures uh, in eastern land, and how they again reunited. The story is the same, but the way they developed, or the way they just what we can say, mm, introduced the story or delivered the story specifically, it matters a lot, and that's why this one, it was oddly written in short 2 and 3 straight lines. Okay. uh, I just want to deviate from this one thing. So as a student of literature, we must have to keep this thing in our mind. ओके. फक्त आपल्याला एम ए इंग्लिशची डिग्री मिळाली म्हणजे आपल्याला सगळं मिळालं असं नाहीये. ओके. सो हे बघायचं की आपण खरंच तितके कॅपेबल आहोत का, तर त्या गोष्टी खरंच तितक्या प्रॉपरली आपण करतोय का, किंवा आपलं तितकं सगळं खरंच जमतं का. म्हणून मग तेव्हा जेव्हा अशा गोष्टी येतात ना, तेव्हा ह्या गोष्टी हिट होतात. लाईक सी किंग हॉर्न, सिम्पल स्टोरी आहे. पण ही खूप फेमस झाली किंग हॉर्नची स्टोरी. आणि बाकीच्या नाही, बाकीच्या पोएम्स नाही झाल्या तेवढ्या, विच वर असोसिएटेड विथ द वर्स रोमांस. ओके. वर्स रोमांस का, only because of style of writing. It was oddly written in short 2 and 3 straight lines. ओके. आता मग परत ही पण एक वेगळी गोष्ट आहे की आपल्याला स्ट्रेस लाईन्स असल्या पाहिजे, माहीत असल्या पाहिजे, अनस्ट्रेस लाईन माहीत असल्या पाहिजे, मीटर्स माहीत असले पाहिजे, आयॅम्बिक पेंटामीटर्स. ओके. अँड डायडॅक्टिक व्हर्जन ऑफ पोएट्री आणि हे ते म्हणजे along with the actual writing we must have an idea about the technical things also. आता आपल्याला म्हणते की हा तुम्ही तर नॉन टेक्निकल वाला माणसं. नो, वी ऑल्सो हॅव द टेक्निकल थिंग्स और टेक्निकॅलिटी इन द लिटरेचर. कसंही लिहून चालत नाही. ओके. तसंच कसंही स्टडी करून नाही चालत. इट विल गिव्ह यू अ डिफरंट काय म्हणता येईल अँगल, नॉट ओनली ऑफ लिटरेचर बट दी ऑल थिंग्स. आणि लिटरेचर सोबतच मग कसं आहे आपली पर्सनॅलिटी पण डेव्हलप होते. म्हणून इट्स कॉल्ड ॲज द लिटरेचर इज नथिंग बट द सोसायटी ऑफ द मिरर ऑफ द सोसायटी. लिटरेचर इज द मिरर ऑफ द सोसायटी. Leave it. But still these are things very important. The Lady of Havelock, The Den, A Tale of Princely Love, and the adventures similar to King Horn, but more is completely executed. We can find that is many more such romances were produced in 14th century. Mata, that was goes on only. We can find that is the chivalry crime romance was there, and it was developed between the period of Geoffrey Chaucer, but it was started before Geoffrey Chaucer. आपण अजून चॉसर सुरूच नाही केला. ओके. चॉसर वॉज इंट्रोड्यूस्ड इन मिड 14th century. ओके. चॉसर पिक्चर मध्ये कधी आलंय, लेट्स से 1350 नंतर, 1360 नंतर पकडा स्पेसिफिकली. He was born in 1340 only. So the period of the Great Plague at that time, Black Death च्या period मध्ये. Then but this one, that is romantic literature was or this one, the verse romance was became famous from that onwards, but it has laid its foundation in the early 13th century. Okay. Hope you're just getting my point. I'm just trying to tell you some technical as well as historical things in the literature, in literary way. Okay, then popularly subgenres were the matter of Britain. Yeah, this is one of the again, important thing. There's religious and moral writing in this Anglo-Norman period. Along with it, we have these matters like matter of France, then specifically this matter of France, matter of Britain, the Seg of Melin, O'Toole. These are the some names which were considered in a romances in Anglo-Norman period. Okay. So this the matter of Britain. What is this matter of Britain? It's nothing but the Arthurian romances such as of Arthur and of Merlin and Jon and Gawain, Then the matter of Troy, that is tales of the antiquity such as the Siege of Troy and the King Aslander. Okay, and this the English Breton lays, that is stories of outwardly magic such as the Lay Friends and Sir Orfeo, modeled after those of professional Breton storytellers. Okay, these Breton storytellers are again horrible people. The story was too much lengthier. Okay, and that's why this one I would like to tell you some things. uh, Even though these are the considered as the worst romances, one of them, some of them is in a poetic sense, like the stage of Million was one of the poem which was considered of the uh, part of this Othul group of poetry or romances. It was written in 12 line rhyming stanzas. 12 line rhyming stanzas. Central figure of this romance is Bishop Turpin. Okay, this Bishop Turpin and his story we can find in this Sage of Melin, but again it has again literary merit. Yeah, we can call the relatively unsophisticated works were written for a bourgeois audience. Again, literature written for the people, like audience also matters for whom it has been written. I would like to give you the example of folk tales. Like we have an idea about the Bharud in Marathi. त्याला भारूड म्हणतो आपण, कीर्तन किंवा भारूड. Okay, what is it? It is nothing but the description of the religious story in lyrical way or in the form of song, and it's meant for the people who are not that much literate. Okay, आता त्याला वेगळं रूप आलंय मान्य आहे, but still I'm telling you that it's originally invented for the people who are not that much literate, but they must have get some literary values or some religious values through such kind of performances like Bharod and Kirtan, and that's why it became very popular. On the other hand, I would like to give the examples of the pravachans. Okay, pravachans are the things where we have such kind of uh, lectures delivering states, like nowadays we know we have different lecture competitions. Okay, we people invite some scholars and they delivered a lecture, and that lecture was not mean for the person who doesn't have an idea. Let's take the example of today's lecture. Right now I'm just talking with you, this is a kind of lecture. Okay, but it's not meant for those who don't even have an idea about what is poetry or what is the literature. Okay, but those who have a specific ground of the literature, they can easily understand whatever I am trying to tell you. Okay, because they have some base. So that's why lecturing and just delivering a message through a real tale, that that are the two different things. The same thing we can find over here also, that these people, that is in early 13th century writers, they have tried to segregate these things. The audience, means the literature written is differ with the audience. Okay, so as the audience change, literature change. So that's why this line, that is written for the bourgeois audience, and the manuscripts that preserves them are early example of the commercial book production. Manuscripts. Okay, आपल्याला माहिती आहे की प्रिंटिंग तर खूप लेट आली 15व्या शतकात, but till that there was some these manuscripts or the oral tradition were there. Okay, the humorous beats epic makes its first appearance in Britain in the 13th century with the fox and the wolf, taken indirectly from the old French Roman day romance, Romandalos. uh, that is humorous beast epic. आता परत epic पर्यंत आलो आपण. Will it doesn't have that much thing, but you have to keep these two to three things in mind. That is the earliest English fabulio and the Demsirith. Fabulio जसं आपल्याकडे येतो उपदेशातील कथा किंवा अशा गोष्टी आहेत. These are English fabulios. Okay, folk tales. Another sort of humor is found in the land of this Cogin, which depicts the utopia better than the heaven, where rivers run with milk, honey, and wine wheels. Okay, again, this is nothing but the utopian thought process of the writer, and there is nothing to compare with, so that's why they have just compared it with the heaven. Yeah. Then I would like to tell you this thing, the lyrics which was used in the poetry, or let's say the literature of the period. The lyric was virtually known to the old English poets. Poems such as Dior and Wolf and Edvisser. We talked about the Wolf Dior yesterday, where we can find that Cinewolf was the person who had written this poem, but the lyrics which he has used are pretty different. Okay, so the lyrics are thematically different from those that began to circulate orally in the 12th century. आता बरोबर आहे की at the starting period of the lyrics, the quality of words or the choice of instead of quality of words, I would say the choice of words is differ. Okay, and uh, it was circulated 12th in the 12th century and to be written down in great numbers in the 13th century. So, century wise it has changed. Then as we talked about these different poems in our last lecture also, that is Follies in the Praise, then each arm of Horland. See, words, each am of Irfan. Now the words are the different, but we can read it. Hmm. We talk about this when we talk about the Geoffrey Chaucer, because you might you can relate at that time. Right now you don't have an idea about these writers, so we can't describe their writing style, no. So that's why we have to go some. It will take some time, but these are some examples that how the words are differently used. Okay, and these have given the name of the different lyrics, like Harley lyrics, then British Library manuscript Harley, which was 22 to 53 from the early 14th century. Okay, and they all have anthologies for this poem. Best example of early Middle English poetry, that was a man in the moon. Okay, some courtly romance over there, chivalric romance was depicted, and again the lyrics used over there are hit different. Prose, yeah, prose of the period. Again, it was the another thing to discuss. So, as time is not going to permit us to just go and talk about the uh, prose today, so we'll stop for the day. And while coming tomorrow, we'll talk about, first of all, we'll talk about the prose of this Anglo-Norman literature or Anglo-Saxon Anglo-Norman period, and then we'll move towards the literature of Chaucer's age, or let's say Middle English period. Okay, any questions regarding this? Anything else which you want to ask?